The thing with agoraphobia is that it's not about being out in open areas, per se. Depending on the person, of course. There are indeed some people who simply cannot bear to be in any location that does not possess four walls and a roof overhead. Though that's generally more of a physiological problem with its roots in a sense of vertigo. It's something to do with the inner ear, and I do experience it from time to time myself as it happens. I just don't understand it particularly well because it's never been enough of an issue for me to need to dig deeper into it, and I simply haven't had the inclination to study it in depth. Whereas agoraphobia, or generalized anxiety disorder as I prefer to call it, is something that has borne a significant influence over the entirety of my adult life. So, coming from a background of reading psychology textbooks as a hobby in my teen years, yeah, that's what I used to do, to later making strides to more fully understand the condition with hopes of combating it in myself, I don't boast when I say that there are not many people you could speak to that are as well versed in the condition as yours truly. So much so, in fact, that my doctor has frequently deferred to myself when I've discussed my predicament with him. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, and this is in no way intended to diminish the efforts made by healthcare professionals. All I'm saying is that my knowledge of agoraphobia extends far past a layman's understanding. And whilst it is true that I am not intimately versed with the academic literature, it would be unwise to attempt to dismiss my comprehension of the subject. Academic study can only take you so far before you have to start deferring to personal experience, especially around psychological issues, especially with maladies of the mind. Something which is distinct, we must remember, from disorders of the physiology of the brain. The latter is mechanical, whilst the former is software, if you will. And one would not expect a mechanic to be quite so proficient at fixing your Windows installation. You know what I mean?
There's no pleasing some people.
That's not to say that I'm some kind of galaxy brain, ultimate authority on the matter, and I can only speak with absolute authority on my own experiences. However, I'm familiar enough that I can make some reliable assertions on a grander scale, like saying that agoraphobia is more of an issue of people. The reason anxiety rises when leaving the home is because of the apparent inevitability of human interaction that it would entail. Going outside means being around people. Avoiding the first negates the possibility of the following. See? So it's worth pointing out, this wasn't intended to be a direct sequel to last month's video. It was just something that came to me because Still Alive started floating around in my head at work. Mirror's Edge is one of my favourite games, though replaying it recently I'm beginning to wonder why. It must be something to do with Origin. It has to be something to do with Origin. Anyway, it's one of my favourite games, and all I really wanted to do was gush about it for a while. But as the week continued and the song continued rattling around in my noggin, it all started to coalesce. It was soothing, like a personal anchor. You see, I work in a supermarket, and of course, that means I spend several hours a week surrounded by dozens of people. Something which I find quite trying, especially with the number of them wearing a mask beneath their fucking nose. If I can wear one with all the anxiety issues and sensory overload that come from being autistic for 16 hours a fucking week, you can wear one for 20 minutes, you vapid, intellectual spunk bubble. Your mother should have spit you out on the bloody carpet.
I've lost contact with the Capitol!
Too many of them!
And relax. It wasn't really the song itself that did it, or the game it's attached to, or even the profound impact Mirror's Edge had on my life, because as much as I love the game, it didn't really affect me in any significant way. It wasn't some defining, eye-opening moment for me or anything like that. I touched on this in an earlier video. Media doesn't get under my skin like that, like it does with some people. At least, not in the way it seems to with most people. So, nay, 'twas not that my life was irrevocably changed during the first drift through Faith's journey, or any future playthroughs for that matter, but as time's gone by, my relationship with Mirror's Edge has matured as both I and my life have matured. Just as anxiety has informed the way my life has played out, influencing the way I think and interact with the world at large, my attachment to the outside world has inevitably changed in some rather drastic ways. You see, I actually very much like being outside, out in the open, without being constrained by anything. I like the sense of freedom of being in the open air. Fields and high vantage points have always held a prominent position of importance within my psyche. I love being able to look out unimpeded all the way to the distant horizon, only losing my capacity for clear vision as the Earth's curvature and the limitations of my own eyesight dictate. Last year I worked at an Amazon warehouse as a night staff cleaner. Not the easiest job in the world, being surrounded by upwards of 400 people for 8 hours at a time, not to mention the extra time spent travelling to and from by public transport. And though my work mostly had me doing my own thing, with little time for interacting with other employees, it was still immensely draining just knowing they were there. Seeing people all around me, all of the time. Even if I grew quite fond of some of them, it got to me, it just wore me down.
Because you know what? No matter how many times I get hit, I always get back up.
So, at every opportunity, I'd head out to the car park. It's 4 stories high. Not quite as tall as the warehouse itself, but still a good 40 feet up. And on the highest level, there were a few picnic tables strewn out across a patch of astroturf. And in the dead of night, well, really into the following morning, despite being only a couple of miles from Manchester Airport and a major motorway, it was almost completely silent. At least, silent as far as human beings are concerned. The only sounds left were the world at large, the world itself, natural sounds, wind, distant traffic occasionally, perhaps the patter of rain if I was really lucky. I'd just lay there on top of the table, looking up at the sky and let all the stress and anxiety drift away, at least for a little while. There was many a day I wouldn't have finished if not for that. But all that's not an option I have anymore. Supermarkets, in the UK at least, aren't prone to having massive parking complexes attached to them. Most are only a single story and there's rarely a reliable roof access. My current employment is only 4 hours a day at least, which is a lot easier to deal with. And though there are still a lot of people, what with us needing food to, live and stuff, there are less of them and more places to find a little moment of solace. Though I also don't get a break because of the short shifts, so...
This is awkward.
Damn, even for me this is a long build-up. It might just be about time for me to start bringing this all together, eh? Okay, so here's what we're all about. When we have limited recourse for external stress relief, we have to turn inward to engender a similar result. Falling back and lingering on pleasant memories, perhaps engaging in a dialogue or telling ourselves stupid jokes to lighten the mood. Plan out what we're going to do later, think about the new game waiting at home, or time we'll have to spend with loved ones, things we can now afford to do with the money earned from the employment causing the immediate issue. Things like that. For me, I think about solitude, being alone, with nothing to keep me company but open sky and inclement weather. I'm especially fond of rain. So much so that I actually go outside and walk around sometimes just to feel it washing down over me. Though I'm far more partial to staying indoors and listening to it patter against the windows. Corrugated iron roofs are amazing while we're on the subject. Clouds are the best part of rain. They're so light and floaty and they bring the rain with them. Anticipation and all that, It makes them my absolute favourite part of the environmental system. Period. Is it obvious that my thought processes take something of a circuitous route to get to where I'm going? I would hope so, because it's not something I've had much luck in avoiding. Nicknames, for example, that I give to people will often require a number of steps and hoops to jump through. They make perfect sense when explained, but can be a tad on the lateral side. And such is the case with the significance of Mirror's Edge in my working life. See, as already stated, the comfort derived from humming Still Alive at work takes just such a multi-tiered route to the end result, and thus the reason I'm so terribly fond of the game. Despite what many still seem to insist, it's not a first-person shooter. It's first-person, yes, and there are shooting mechanics, but apart from one section, you never have to fire a gun, and even then, a single shell is all it takes. Throughout the entire runtime, you absolutely have to discharge a firearm one single solitary time. Even during action sequences when weapons are available, players are tacitly discouraged from using them by their weighty, clumsy aiming mechanics and typically well-armoured opponents. You also move slower when you're holding them, you're very clumsy with them. It is almost universally faster and more efficient to use a gun solely as a way of dispatching enemies quickly by disarming them, then throw it aside and keep moving on to the next poor chump. And I absolutely love that. My favourite part of the game outside of the parkour.
Well, as my great-grandfather used to say, cool.
Where Mirror's Edge really shines is in the quiet moments though, which make up the majority of the game, thankfully. Even the indoor sections, mostly, still retain that sense of freedom that the game is built on. Everything from the gameplay to the undercooked narrative emphasises that sense of being free, high above, flitting from rooftop to rooftop, free like a bird, drifting lazily on currents up above it all, in that moment unrestrained by the trials and tribulations of fighting just to live for one more day. When you come back down, plant your feet on the ground and stop moving, you're back to the grind of making it through just another day, clinging to anything that will see you through the moment. But once you're moving again, once you're back up in the clouds, everything just drifts away and you lose yourself in the flow. Wind whistling through your hair, the sounds of the city, the world, everything just drifting away into an imperceptible background hum. Nothing else matters beyond reaching the next step on your journey, with the full knowledge that even that will be nothing more than a step on the way to something else. Every journey, as they say, is begun with a single step.
I understood that reference.
And this is why Still Alive has been flitting around in my head, soothing me during those moments of intense anxiety, because it reminds me that it's all temporary. Just a little while longer and I'll be back out in the flow of life. Right now I may be tied down with immediate commitments, but it's only a few scant hours before I can lose myself in the greater world once more, casting myself back adrift on the eddies of a simpler and more free-form flow of events that feed one into the other, leaping and bounding from one high point to the next without stopping to worry, or even think about where I'm going to land next. Never stopping, just moving ever onward. Even if I circle back, it's only because I'm making my way around to another path that leads deeper into the flow of the rest of my life. Of course, I don't literally go running and jumping across rooftops, though I have frequently considered taking up parkour. Jumping on buildings used to be illegal, then the French turned it into a sport. Well, I suppose it was about time they did something useful, am I right? Anyway, I'm not literally doing that. But the way my life is now structured, the way I've chosen to live, that's what it feels like. I have my family commitments, of course, and I take them very seriously. You can hear the baby in the background right now, and I'm not editing that out. Nothing has ever, or will ever, be more important to me than my children. So how appropriate. I've told my wife the same thing. I made it very abundantly clear right from the outset. You see, I come from a pretty direct Scandinavian descent. Vikings, you know? We have a saying. A man's first responsibility should be to his children, because his wife may be a crazy woman.
What is the matter with you people?
Children are our future, the future of all of us, directly and indirectly. Your children, mine, everyone's. They are all the future of all of us, whether we like it or not. And children have a beautiful habit of doing anything but what you would want them to do. Like her in the background right now. Anything but what you expect. Okay, this was to be expected actually, she does this a lot. See, you have to stay on your toes. You can't dwell on the moment because there will always be something else coming just around the corner. And you have to learn to roll with that, just like you would if you were traversing the sky rises of a dysfunctional utopia like the one depicted in Mirror's Edge. So this went off in some rather interesting directions. There's still so much more I have to say about the game. So much I want to just gush about because it truly is one of my favourites. But it just doesn't seem important right now. That's one of the great things about writing these scripts, and it's why I've been continuing with them despite the lack of relative return on my efforts. It's why I will continue to do so, even if nothing more than a few comments and a couple of likes comes to them. Because that's the thing about video games. People like to think that game reviews are a dream job. You get to play games all day, isn't that great? And, well, it is, but if that's all you want, then you're doing it wrong, mate. If you want to do this, game reviews, critiques or whatever, because you like playing games, because you love playing games, you'll burn out and be unfulfilled. You have to do it because you love talking about games, discussing them, dissecting them, really analysing what they mean and what they mean to you.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
Like I've done here. So I'm actually very happy with how this turned out, even if it was completely different from what I intended and wanted. And oh my, how apt is that? Once again, truly embracing the very essence of what Mirror's Edge is. I've gone with the flow and just let it take me where it will. So here we are, at the climax. For now at least. If you like what I'm doing here, then feel free to flow on down and do all the usual below. Perhaps run, jump and tumble your way over to my Patreon and let some payola come flowing my way. But if not, I'll see you next month anyway. It's quite short this one, but thank you for watching. There's a second part to that saying, by the way. A woman's first responsibility should be to her children, because her husband may be a crazy man.